Hello and welcome to this special program as we commemorate 37 years of the World Partnership Walk in Canada. My name is Kiran Hayat and I'm the Community Relations Coordinator for the Aga Khan Council, and I'm coming to you from the Ismaili Centre in Toronto. Tonight, we are privileged to have two very special guests. Dr. Najmuddin Najm is the CEO of the Aga Khan Foundation in Afghanistan. Dr. Najmuddin has worked with the Aga Khan Foundation in various capacities since 2004. His leadership and local roots have been integral to the Aga Khan Foundation's response to the current situation in Afghanistan. Khalil Shariff is no stranger to many Canadians as the CEO of the Aga Khan Foundation Canada. Prior to joining the Aga Khan Foundation Canada in 2005, Khalil was a consultant with McKinsey & Company, where he advised governments, financial institutions, and healthcare providers on strategy, organization, and operational improvement. Dr. Najmuddin and Khalil, it is a pleasure to have you both here today. Khalil, congratulations on officially launching the World Partnership Walk 2022. Can you tell us a little bit about what the walk is going to look like this year and what you're hoping to achieve?
Kiran, thanks very much for taking the time to host this conversation. You're absolutely right. We have now launched this year's World Partnership Walk campaign. Look, every walk campaign is important. As you know, this has been an annual campaign in Canada since 1985. So it's got a long history. But of course, like all parts of our societies, we have been through quite a few convulsions over the last couple of years because of COVID. And so this year, we are beginning very slowly to pivot back to some of our usual routines, at least in some ways. And the most important is that we're going back to the spring, because you'll recall for the last couple of years, the World Partnership Walk campaign has moved from its traditional springtime frame to the fall. Well, this year we're back to the spring, and we're hoping that as a result we'll be able to reignite so much of the spring energy that has been the centerpiece of the walk campaign for so long, including getting an opportunity for people to reach out to their workplaces, where in the spring maybe they'll be able to come back as team captains, go to their workplaces, bring those people along. Because I do think that one of our big themes this year for the walk is to remember that even as we begin the slow crawling out of this COVID situation here, that the world has confronted, because of COVID, some very, very serious troubles. There's obviously been a massive economic impact of COVID. There's been a big educational impact of COVID. There's been massive gender issues as a result of the COVID pandemic around the world. And so this year's walk is a time for us to remember all the people around the world who have also suffered during the COVID crisis, and to really use this as an opportunity to bring Canadian friends and colleagues together to say, look, we are going to respond. We are going to contribute to the quality of life of people around the world as they emerge from the pandemic, that we might be able to look to the future with a bit of confidence and hope here, and really try to inspire that same sense of confidence and hope around the world. So this year, we're going to be getting people together. We won't be doing large in-person walks that we are used to maybe pre-COVID, but we are going to ask people to come together in small ways, informally, in their own neighborhoods, maybe in their own workplaces, and to walk together, but maybe not in our large-scale walks as we've done historically, at least not quite yet. But use this chance to connect with friends and colleagues, bring them together, remind them that this great tradition of Canada reaching out to the world is as important today as it's ever been.
That's excellent, and we're so happy to see that the walk is returning back to normal. Khalil, we know that the support that the Aga Khan Foundation Canada receives from Canadians is critical to so many transformative projects around the world. Can you provide us with an example of what difference this support is making throughout those projects?
Kiran, there are so many examples. Let me just pick one now, and we'll talk about a few others over the course of our conversation. But let me just talk a bit about the work we've been doing in East Africa in education. I think those of you who have been involved with the walk for many, many years will know that our work in education in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Uganda, even in Mozambique has been a long, long part of our work, both at Aga Khan Foundation, but also through the Aga Khan schools system, and of course the Aga Khan University. And this work has had massive impact, not only in our own Aga Khan schools, but in a very large number, thousands of public and community schools, where of course the vast majority of people in East Africa go to school. Now, because of the COVID pandemic, this has been very significantly disrupted, like it has been for schools across the world. And in fact, one of my biggest concerns about where we're going to have to focus after COVID is on the educational gap that's been created as a result of schools being closed for so long. Now, one of the things we were doing in East Africa before COVID is we had a very, very significant effort that goes back many years with the government of Canada and with Canadians' financial support sourced from the walk and the golf tournaments across the country. We've been working in thousands of public schools to improve the quality of education in those schools. Well, of course, COVID hit, those schools were shut down. One of the things I'm so proud of is the way in which our leaders in East Africa worked with the heads of the school systems, the ministries of education, and so quickly came to develop a whole set of innovative responses, packs of materials to be distributed to people at home so they could support home learning, all kinds of supports to teachers to figure out how could they pivot to a more distance education modality. One of the really interesting innovations was a radio program that was created basically out of scratch and very, very quickly, because they decided and they realized that radio was going to be the easiest and quickest and most economical way to reach out to the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of families who are not going to have access to the regular school system. So the project team came together and they started producing these excellent radio shows in close collaboration, in this instance with the Tanzanian education system leaders. And this has reached, each episode was reaching tens of thousands of families. So it's a great example of where we've been able to take capacity that we've built for years and years and years, use that capacity to quickly pivot when COVID created a new set of circumstances, and still try to support as much as we can the kids who were dedicated to supporting. And you know, one of the things about that particular incident is we all know about how gender unequal the impacts of COVID has been. So many women have had to take on unexpected care responsibilities as a result of COVID, either for elders or for kids who are now at home. These kinds of supports that the team was able to come up with were also meant to help mothers especially and women in East Africa deal with so many of the consequences of COVID and the responsibilities that they were bearing as a result. So really, really proud of this. We're now, of course, working hard with each of the education systems to think about what we're going to do to rapidly accelerate learning post-COVID, which is going to be a big priority for us.
Thank you, Khalil. That's an excellent example of how we were able to pivot and shift to a new form of learning that was very much required in the time of need. We know that one of the areas that the Aga Khan Foundation is supporting critical work is in Afghanistan. We're privileged to have Dr. Najm with us here today. Dr. Najmuddin, thank you so much for being here today. I'd like to start off by asking you to provide us a summary of the current situation in Afghanistan.
Many thanks, Kiran. Afghanistan has been through a difficult situation for the last many years. Because of different reasons, including last 2 decades of war in Afghanistan and insecurity, the climate change and pressure on communities, a fragile economy, and an externally dependent service sector in Afghanistan. We all know that this was already the situation and the overall conditions here, but after the recent changes, and particularly after 15th August 2021, things started to become more and more difficult. we could see features of a disaster, features of a humanitarian situation that was coming up. I'm sure you all have seen the impacts of the changes, and people are very much aware of that. We could see that people were very much concerned about the livelihood options that they were losing, unemployment, limited access to services because of the shrinking support, donor support to Afghanistan. The fact that the banking system and access to finance in the country became very much limited. And the fact that education facilities, which were already under pressure because of COVID-19, they were also becoming very much limited in terms of their service scope in Afghanistan. During that time, another challenge that we all were facing in the country was the fact that international community was trying to figure out the ways that they had to re-engage because of the speed and the scale of the changes that occurred in Afghanistan. We were witnessed that a number of active projects were either paused or partially closed in Afghanistan. We know that a large amount of donors in international communities fund to Afghanistan was also frozen. So these were the challenges that we started to see after August 15, 2021, and unfortunately the crisis, both in terms of humanitarian situation and also attention to the overall longer-term development in Afghanistan continues.
Thank you, Dr. Najmuddin. The current circumstances are obviously very concerning. Can you tell us how the AKDN is responding to the immediate humanitarian needs that we are seeing?
Well, we focused on two main areas, and we shaped and directed our interventions. One, as you said, to respond to the current situation, to provide assistance to the people in these very difficult times, but also we focused on continuation to make sure that the gains that we have made during last 2 decades in Afghanistan and the foundations that we built and we created for development is actually continuing, and we maintain them. On the first part, we started to engage, again, as I said, with people, with stakeholders on the ground, with international partners, to assist people in difficult times, particularly with provision of food supplies. We wanted to make sure that during the lean season, and particularly during last very difficult winter, people at the household level, they have access to enough food to survive. We also continue to work with farmers to make sure that they access input supplies, the livestock development materials, and then support that we could do on that front. As AKDN, we also try to keep the services continuing. The health sector was one of the critical sectors that we focused from the beginning. You might have heard that in the early weeks of changes in Afghanistan, there were rumors about health system that may collapse in the country. We were able to continue the operation of health facilities which were under our management, and we continued health services across the geographies that we were active. We also continue to bring more complementary activities and complement the health service delivery at all levels, from tertiary healthcare facility in Kabul up to provincial hospitals, up to district hospitals, up to community level interventions and activities. In addition to that, we continue to also work with education system wherever and whenever it was possible to support education in the ground and continue with the activities that were possible to be done. We continue to also address some critical infrastructures that were really important for creating access for communities to remote areas.
Thank you, Dr. Najmuddin. That is some remarkable work that the AKDN is doing on the ground in Afghanistan. I wonder if you can spend a minute talking a little bit about the support that the AKDN has for women in Afghanistan.
This is a very important area. We tried very actively from the beginning, and I would say very proactively, to make sure that women empowerment and our reach to women in Afghanistan, and considering the gender aspects of the work, remains critical as an important value and principle that we apply to every single intervention that we do in Afghanistan. We started that with bringing all our female colleagues back to work. Started from Kabul, gradually expanded to the provincial offices. We wanted to make sure that with this proactive action, demonstrate the fact that it is really important to have our female colleagues in our work. It's not symbolic. It's not just about numbers. It really matters. Without them, as an institution, we cannot function. Without them, as an institution, we cannot reach communities. We also expanded that to our programs. Any single intervention that we have done, be it addressing the food security issues, the current humanitarian challenges, or anything that we have done as continuation of the development activities in Afghanistan, we wanted to make sure that we reach women, be it as a household, at the household level, or directly working with women in the field. We always believe that there is a local solution, and particularly if we continue to engage with women and with societies in the ground, if we continue to bring people to the center of decision making, joint planning, and importantly, to make sure that we address those issues and challenges that the people bring it up. So that has been a very important element of the work. This is something that we are very much committed, and we will continue to do that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Najmuddin. And thank you for that overview and examples of the critical work that is being done on the ground by the AKDN in support to Afghanistan. Dr. Najmuddin, the Aga Khan Foundation and Aga Khan Development Network makes long-term commitments to the countries where it operates. In what ways is the AKDN thinking past the current crisis and into the future?
Kiran, I think we have proved that by maintaining our operations in Afghanistan. In a time that a lot of people, they were thinking what to do. Should they remain engaged with Afghanistan, and in what scale? We demonstrated our commitment by remaining operational, by maintaining our human capacity, by supporting the country with the resources that comes from campaigns like this. And as I mentioned earlier, we continue to operate with those reserve and internal resources in a time that donor funding and external funding to Afghanistan was shrinking. We also realized the fact that short-term interventions, short-term activities is not the only solution. We want to make sure that we address the root causes. We want to make sure that we use opportunities and potential that exist. I know most of the people that they watch this interview, they think about the challenges. They look at the features that the media is presenting every day from Afghanistan. honestly, we don't want to ignore that. But sitting here in Kabul, being in touch with people through hundreds of committed employees within the foundation, thousands of committed employees of the network here in Afghanistan, we also know that there is a lot of potential. We know that there is a lot of opportunities. We try to understand the situation better. We try to also implement programs and activities in coordination with communities, with their engagement, and more importantly, to make sure that they own the results and the impact of our work. We continue to remain engaged in agriculture and food security, in education, in health, in building critical infrastructure, in community development as an important element of the work, in restoration of the cultural heritages in Afghanistan, in helping people to come out of the impacts of natural disaster. And we want to also assure whoever support programs in Afghanistan that we will deliver whatever we are committed in a way that we are transparent to our internal systems, we are transparent to our partners, and more importantly, we are compliant to the values and the principles that we believe as the network.
Kiran, what we've heard, I think, from Dr. Najmuddin ought to give all of us a real sense of inspiration, frankly, with respect to the capacity that the AKDN has today to deal with a situation like the challenges and opportunities in Afghanistan. First, Dr. Najmuddin has talked about with such eloquence this idea of bifocal vision, right, with one eye focused on the immediate life-saving, urgent humanitarian needs that the country and its people are facing, but always with another eye focused on the long term, thinking about how do we build back, how do we look past the crisis, how do we create opportunity for the people we're seeking to serve. I think the second thing we've heard is this commitment to a long-term relationship with the people and the communities that we're serving. I mean, Dr. Najmuddin has talked about the 2 decades of work, and I tell you that social license, that authority and relationship that we have earned with Afghans themselves is such an important part of our ability to operate in the current circumstance. And then to hear Najmuddin tell us about opportunities, not just challenges, it reminds us that the AKDN's principle of work, this commitment to the potential and possibility of every individual and every community that comes together with an intent of improving their own circumstances. When that happens and we are able to support them, all kinds of things are possible. And Dr. Najmuddin has talked to us about how that guiding principle, that ideal, is still such an important part of the thinking and the ethos of the work. So we're, of course, deeply grateful to Dr. Najmuddin and all of his colleagues. The extraordinary Afghan leadership that we have seen during this time is a great source of comfort and confidence and inspiration for all of us around the world who are watching the situation and seeking to help.
Thank you, Khalil. Khalil, you and Dr. Najmuddin have certainly provided us with a sense of some of the needs and, more importantly, the opportunities that exist to really make a difference. So tell me, how can we help?
You know, AKF Canada for 40 years has relied on the support of Canadians inside and outside the Jamaat to allow it to bring together the type of support that can catalyze all kinds of important efforts in Africa and Asia. And what I wanted to say, Kiran, to all the people watching is that the opportunities in front of us today to make real, lasting improvements in the quality of life of people around the world, often in the most difficult of situations, is in front of us. That opportunity is available to us. And the walk, this year's World Partnership Walk, is yet again an invitation to each of you, but also to all the people in your circles and your networks to join us, to remember that generational tradition in Canada of not only of thinking about ourselves, but of thinking about those in other circumstances, and understanding it not only as an ethical responsibility to support and to help, but actually as an opportunity for leadership, to shape a world that is more peaceful and prosperous and pluralist for everyone. And we know that's the right thing to do. We know it's the smart thing to do for us and our children. So I hope all of you will go to worldpartnershipwalk.com, figure out how you will participate this year, whether it's just as an individual, whether it's part of a neighborhood group, whether it's at your workplaces, bringing together a team. Find a way to act on the ethical impulse that I think we all share today at this moment when we all feel the world is so interdependent. Let's not just be interdependent in fact, let's be interdependent in spirit and in ethic. That's what the World Partnership Walk has been about for 40 years. It's what it is about again this year. And I know that we can count on the support of all the Canadians across the country as we look at making a better world for all.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation, and I would like to thank both of you for joining us today. I would also like to thank you both for all the work that you do and the challenges that you face in helping so many people around the world. It is truly a privilege to be able to speak to you both today, and we look forward to supporting you both. Thank you. I would like to thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope that tonight's conversation has provided you with some insight on all the work of the Aga Khan Development Network, both today and over the last 4 decades. We look forward to your continued support. Stay well and good night.
जैसे कि कहते हैं ना, मतलब कि ये हमने ये प्रूव नहीं करना कि वो मैं स्ट्रॉन्ग है, वो ऑलरेडी स्ट्रॉन्ग है, लेकिन हमें लोगों के परसेप्शन को चेंज करना, ये हमारा मिशन है। कि लोग परसीव इस तरह ना करें कि वुमेन कमज़ोर है। हमेशा पॉजिटिव सोचती हूँ, मतलब मैं सोचती हूँ कि नहीं इसका हल है, लेकिन वो लोग कुछ लड़कियाँ होती हैं हमारे फ्रेंड्स से कि कहते कि नहीं ये हमारा नॉर्म है, हमारे वैल्यूज़ हैं, हमें फॉलो करना है।
अम्मी से कि हमें भी दो, कहते आप क्या करते हो, लेके बेटे को लेने चाहिए, इस तरह बातें बनाती है। इधर मैट्रिक तक पढ़ते ना, फिर आगे नहीं छोड़ते ना, आप बेटी हो क्या करेंगे, इधर पढ़ के बेटे को जाना चाहिए, पढ़ के वो कुछ बनेगी, कर जाके हम नहीं बनेंगे।
होता है सर, हमारे यहाँ पे बेटों को ज़्यादा वो लाड प्यार दिया जाता है, बेटियों को नहीं दिया जाता है, इसलिए तो ये हो रही थी। बेटों को कहते हैं कि ये कल जाके हमारे घर को संभालेंगे, बेटियाँ पढ़ाई हैं, कल जाएंगी।
नॉर्म्स और वैल्यूज़ भी तो हमने ही बनाए, हमारे पेरेंट्स ने ही बनाए, तो हम कोई पॉजिटिव अगर उसमें चेंजेस लाए तो कोई ख़राबी नहीं है।
कि किस तरीके से जो है फीमेल्स की सुनी जाए, किस तरीके से जो है फीमेल जो है वो अपने आप को एक डिसीजन मेकिंग प्रोसेस में अपने आप को वो शामिल कर सके। तो हम ये हमारी जो इदारा है, तो इस इदारे के थ्रू हम जो है फीमेल्स को एम्पावर करने की हम लोग कोशिश कर रहे हैं।
एक ऐसा हम लोग थिएटर करें जो इंटरेस्टिंग भी हो, जिसमें थोड़ा फ़न भी हो। बहुत सारे इश्यूज़ पे हमने पहले तो ऑब्ज़र्व किया, जाहिर है कि हमारे सोसाइटी में स्पेशली हमारे एरिया में कौन कौन से इश्यूज़ हैं, तो हमने ऑब्ज़र्व किया तो ज़्यादातर ये जेंडर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, जेंडर वायलेंस, डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस और डिसीजन मेकिंग में वुमेंस का नहीं होना। तो हमने सोचा कि हम इन इश्यूज़ को जो है ना थिएटर के ज़रिए करें और हम इंटरेक्टिव थिएटर करते हैं, हम ऑडियंस को भी इन्वॉल्व करते हैं ताकि ऑडियंस एक्टिवली हमें सुने।
तो ये अभी क्योंकि हम अभी अंडर डेवलप्ड है तो टाइम लग जाएगा ये लोगों का ये परसेप्शन चेंज होने में, लेकिन हमारी कोशिश जो है वो जारी है। जैसे आज ही जो है जो थिएटर का जो हमारा परफॉर्मेंस था ये हमने साबित कर दिया, उसमें जो फीमेल्स थी वो ज़्यादा थी, तो मुझे लगता है कि हम थोड़ी बहुत जो है हमने कामयाबी हासिल कर ली है।
इतना जो है ना पहले मुझ में इतना कॉन्फिडेंस नहीं होता था, चीज़ें मुझ में होती थी लेकिन मैं खुल के कभी भी शेयर नहीं करती थी। एक स्टेप के ज़रिए जो है ना चेंजिंग्स आई है।
बेटियों को पे हमें ट्रस्ट करना होगा जिस तरह हम बेटों पे ट्रस्ट करते हैं।
अगर हमने एक सक्सेसफुल नेशन बनाना है या एक सक्सेसफुल सोसाइटी को रन करना है तो इक्वलिटी बहुत ज़रूरी है।